Hey, this is Jason with Liberty Live. I want to teach you today about the Cedars of Lebanon. Well, if we rewind our clock to 1000 BC, before Christ, or now they're calling it Common Era, we find a time when King David is alive and conversing with God about building him a house. Now, at the time, King David was dwelling in a house made out of cedar wood. And David says to the Lord, "How is it that I dwell in a house of cedar and you are living in a tent?" Because at that time, David had brought the Ark of the Covenant up to Zion, Mount Zion, which is literally across the street, if you will, from Mount Moriah, where the Temple Mount is proper. We went from tabernacle in the wilderness to tent to David and Mount Zion to Temple of Solomon, Mount Moriah. And this is about 40 years before that exchange, maybe 44 years. Well, David was very good friends with Hiram, king of Tyre. This is kind of today where Akko or Haifa kind of would be around today, kind of near the upper left. I think Akko is the right place on the upper left-hand coast of Israel. Well, Tyre and Sidon used to be there. That was a very, very, very wealthy port who Hiram was the king of. Now, Hiram is kind of like Aaron. It means exalted brother or one. Hiram also, from, if you understand the etymology of his names, it actually means that he was a wrestler of stones who prevailed. So he was an exalted brother or one who prevails. And he was a tecton by trade as well, and a king of Tyre. So not only was he a tecton, he was like the superintendent of all tectons. And so when later on, when Solomon hires like 60,000, 70,000, 80,000 men, some of them were from Tyre and Sidon, okay, because the Sidonians, no one could cut wood like those guys, and the people of Tyre had immense wealth and access to all the forests of Lebanon and so forth like this. Okay, so what is cedar wood? First of all, and by the way, this is as close to the cedar of Lebanon that you will see, unless you look at pictures or go there yourself. It has this type of beautiful chucky bark, and it's not that colorful like Colorado cedar or aromatic cedar, which is like a fire, bright reddish, purplish, magenta, pink fuchsia, gorgeous, gorgeous, and blonde. This is kind of just here it is, and it has a gentle note of a warm type of color increase in the center, something that could be like a burnt sienna, very, very light burnt sienna, almost a light copper, and then it goes back into a gradual tin. It has an amazing smell. The difference between this type of cedar and like a Colorado cedar is what we call it, or like a cedar of aromatic red eastern cedar, is kind of like comparing cheap to expensive coffee or home roasted or ground coffee. Same thing with like anything really. Any cheap version is usually diluted. Even like dates, honey, for example, I would bring you into a land flowing with milk and honey. Well, that honey is not from the bee. It's actually date honey. It's one of the 7 species of Israel, one of the promises of the promised land for us to enrich our health, to prosper our physical health. And the very expensive pure stuff is all date honey. The stuff that's a little cheaper, it's mixed with glucose or corn syrup or stuff like that, and then a little date puree. So just to kind of give you a scent, when this is on the altar, this smell is inspiring. It literally will grip your soul and almost take you up, and up to where? To a place of worship. Now, this wood, cedar wood, is a natural. It's kind of like an antimicrobial of woods. It drives out bugs. It's not prone to decay because the cedarwood oils repel the insect life, and so they call it a wood that's tends not to be corrosive for those reasons. It's also very durable. Stays. Matter of fact, they found some wood in the. I'll show you a couple of pictures right here and here. Now these are outside of the mosque on the Temple Mount today. They found these cedar beams that the Temple Mount, the Waqf is the people, the Muslim officials responsible for the tourist attraction, archaeological site that is under right now Muslim control as far as having residents of religious freedom. And they discarded these cedar beams because they're building a mosque underground, And they dated the cedar timbers. There was also cypress. They dated back to 960 BC. Well, I told you 1000 BC was David. 960 BC was David's son Solomon. And what happened in 960 BC is Solomon received instructions from David as David went on to be with the Lord to build the temple of the Lord. And David told Solomon all about Tyre and talked to Tyre about Solomon, Hiram, the king of Tyre. And then Solomon reached out to Hiram 4 years later, after his kingship. And he reached out and he said, can you send cedar wood and timber and all these types of things? And it happened. And 7 years later, the Beth Mikdash, the Holy Temple of the Lord, was built. Now, they built it out of cedar, cedar of Lebanon, and they burned this on the altar exclusively. Now, they say there was other timbers that they burned, but you have to remember that this is going to, think about how many flies would be around a butcher shop, a barbecue, a lot. Well, we need everything we can do to get the insects out. Also, to smell a sweet aroma. If you've ever smelt burning cedar, it's amazing. People put it in their shoes to repel odors. They put it under a slab of salmon at an expensive restaurant. They line their closets with it because the fragrance, it also drives out moths and all kinds of stuff. This is really amazing wood. Now, you and I put Glade plugins or all types of things. We use Glade spray or Febreze to get odor out. Why not just build? By the way, just about every house in America is built out of wood. Now, some of them have bricks and concrete and steel, but it's all encased with wood. I would think just about every single house you've ever seen in your life. Now, some of them on the South Coast are made out of cinder bricks and stuff because they have all kinds of aggressive weather patterns, but even they are still lined and covered on the inside with wood and stuff. So you get the point. Why not build your house out of cedar wood to have a constant aromatic, pleasurable aroma? I mean, this is amazing. So this is what God did. And he covered it with gold, because gold is a symbol of a divine touch, where God is going to dwell. The tabernacle, the temple, the tent of David, these were like God's office. It's where he dwelt on the earth. So everything was lined in gold, because gold, it's reflective, it can handle heat and electromagnetic activity. Just imagine when the Spirit of God is filled with lightning, thunder, electricity, electromagnetic, everything is like glory, right? It's very heavy. So the room had to be built in a way to handle all of that glory of God, and behind that is this precious, precious cedar of Lebanon. Now, another thing about this is they found a fish boat. Here's another picture right here. They found a fish boat, which they believe could belong to Jesus and the apostles. And what's happening is that this boat, everything that Jesus touched, that he blessed, is still here. Everything that he cursed is no longer here. Think about all the cities Jesus said, woe to you. They're actually archaeological piles of rocks. There's no longer a current city there. Everything that received him, and everyone in every city, they still remain. Think of the Garden of Gethsemane, all the olive trees. They're still 2,000-year-old trees there now. Well, this boat, it could ride about 12 to 14 guys on a Sea of Galilee on a night, on a fish boat. And whether that is or is not the fish boat of Jesus, it's from the time. And it's interesting, they did a analysis of the material, and it actually is wood from the cedars of Lebanon. Amazing, right? And they were huge. Here's a picture. I'll show you a better close-up of a famous artist's rendition of the cedars of Lebanon being harvested through the Sidonians and officials of Tyre, as, again, King of Hiram, King of Tyre, was supervising such things. Well, David's house was made out of cedar. The house of God, Yahweh, Elohim, Jesus Christ, the temple of the Lord of the temple, were made out of cedar wood. Then Solomon built his own house, and he made it out of cedar wood. So this is probably the most famous wood of the Bible. There's a few other woods, cypress, algum. There's other types of wood in the Bible that you're going to find. Olive wood was on the temple doors, and certain types of wood they made at harps and instruments that you'll find in the temple worship, like David's harps and lyres and stuff. But we need to understand that cedar wood, why God chose it, and what it is to God. Now, cedar also renders a type of oil, a very fragrant oil that people can use in apothecaries. They can use for even Ayurvedic purposes. You can use it again for conditioning cedar wood if you have some type of closet or adornment or any type of furniture. They make a lot of chests out of cedar wood for blankets and sweaters and so forth, because it really is a preserving agent. So even the wood that God uses is a preserving agent. Cedar wood on the altar is a fragrant agent. Cedar wood oil, you can't miss it. It really is invigorating to be around cedar wood and cedar oil. And again, they use it for to smoke things, to enjoy meats from cedar wood chips or pellets if you have like a Traeger grill. Also, again, when they're serving salmon or something, they'll put it on a plate of cedar. It really is, the application is just ingenious to make your house out of cedar wood. It is probably the most incredible and intelligent wisdom to make it out of a wood that grows by God from nothing to something massive. By the way, cedar seeds from the Lebanese cedar are tiny. They're like, if you can imagine flax seed with little flaps, that's about this big. I mean, literally, like just tiny, tiny, tiny. And it has two flaps because wind catches it and it flies away and lands and plants a cedar of Lebanon tree in the Lebanese forest. It has been growing for thousands of years because of this. Well, then it turns into these massive, massive trees. It reminds me of the parable Jesus said about the mustard seed. It's one of the smallest seeds in the world and produces the largest tree. And that's like our faith. You literally have something this big that turns into something that provides shade for people. It gives an identity to all the woodcutters and a profession to them. It survives. Now, keep in mind those timbers they found outside the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount are now, 1,960 BC, and we're now 2019, right? I mean, that is, that's like 2,000, that's almost 3,000 years, just about, maybe 15 years short, 3,000 years, a piece of wood, and it still remains strong. I wonder if it has a smell at this time, but this is unbelievable. So anyway, I just wanted you to see all the references to the cedar of Lebanon. This is it. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like and smells like if you're on this end of the camera. If not, you'll just have to take my word. It is a pleasing fragrance. And it is life-changing, and God used it to change lives. Now, last thing I want to say for integrity purposes, this is called alligator cedar. It is the closest cedar we can get to besides the cedar in Lebanon in North America. And this actually grows in New Mexico. It does not grow here because of the altitude and the climate. It has the exact same park. I believe it's the same genus. It could be very, very, very close. But if you look at pictures, and here's just a few of some bark samples from the cedar of Lebanon tree, you'll find it is an exact match. Now, why do I say that? Because as opposed to the aromatic cedar, like red, eastern red, the bark is very stringy, almost like a willow tree, like you could just peel it off. And it's dynamic, but it's very different than this. This is, if you can imagine the difference between a potato and a potato, right? And a couple potatoes, there's different species, but they're kind of hard to tell. What's the difference between a pinyon and a spruce and a pine? Good question, right? I mean, and there's ways to tell the difference. There's botanical studies, but to the naked eye, they're pretty similar. Now, unlike these two types of cedar, the bark, it is a different tree altogether. But this cedar really is, this is like the cedars of Lebanon, like a dead match, except for the size. Okay, we got it there. The only thing that's different is these do not grow anywhere near the cedars of Lebanon because of where they lie in relation to the equator and what hemisphere and the type of climate and so forth. So this is just a crash course on the cedars of the Bible. And the last thing is that cedar wood is also used to cleanse the Temple Mount with the ashes of the red heifer. That's probably one of the most famous events that has ever happened in the nation of Israel concerning the first church, or the tabernacle, or the temple. That there has to be a pure red heifer, and it has to be mixed with cedar and hyssop, the ashes, and spread. So this is also a cleansing agent of magnanimous proportions. So I think there's a spiritual lesson in the cedar that it's not as glorious as gold, but neither are you and I, right? We're only glorious when the Spirit of God comes upon our spirit and our soul and illuminates our natural life to make it supernatural.